Oops, I should have opened PowerPoint first.
Right there. Right there. Which, because pointing at that screen doesn't.
Yeah, it's right there. Yeah. Thanks. We had a couple people on vacation who really wanted to see this presentation because they couldn't be here. So let me try it one more time. There we go. Now all we do is hit the slideshow button. There it is. Voila. And everything should look like normal here.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for being here. I'm really honored to be able to share this with you because it's been a passion of mine for a really long time. Quick show of hands, how many of you know what the Iditarod is or have ever heard the word? Okay, awesome. I'm so glad you're here to hear me talk about this. So I wanted to first, I'm going to stand over here. I wanted to first acknowledge that we gather here today on the traditional lands of the Akokisa people of coastal Texas. The land acknowledgement is something that is done in Alaska before every formal gathering. And the image here is something I found from UHCL. There was a student group that was really advocating for the land acknowledgement. So the culture of land acknowledgements is something that I wanted to share with you, as well as all about the race. Now, the race is an elite athletic event, which I never thought I would ever get involved in because I'm really not an elite athletic type of person. Maybe you are, but I'm not. But for me, the hook was the dogs. And so really, when you see the pictures of these amazing canine athletes, I think hopefully you'll get as inspired as I was. So this is the race map. Every year they alternate northern and southern routes. This year, 2024 was the northern route. And so you can see what part of Alaska that it goes through, that little red dot. And one of the reasons that they alternate is because they want to provide the economic support to some of the indigenous communities in the interior of Alaska. And so they alternate northern routes and southern routes in the interior so that those villages can kind of get the economic and the worldly benefit of having the Iditarod come through. The blue stars are the places on the trail that I actually got to visit. So, and I'll show you some pictures from each one. This is a QR code if you're into those kinds of things that will give you a map that you can follow and also a bunch of links to different things. And I can send this out in an email if you're not really into QR codes, but I wanted to just throw that in there because it's an option. There's lots and lots of more resources to follow through. I've got books on the table and dog booties that should be going around. So if that's something that you're into, I'm going to go ahead and do that for a minute so that you can get the link to come up. It's just a quick little Word document with some, or PDF with some links. So many of you might have heard of the serum run in 1925 when people in children in Nome were sick with diphtheria, and think that because the race goes from Anchorage to Nome that's how it got started. But actually it was started by a guy named Joe Reddington Sr. He was in the Army in World War II. And when he got out of the Army, he went to Alaska in 1948, and he and his wife lived a sort of a bush lifestyle with sled dogs and fishing and kind of wilderness survival. They raised a family and they had a kennel of dogs. And so as the years progressed, Joe Reddington Sr. Realized that there were more and more snowmobiles and different ways, and the airplane, of course, was getting to be popular. And so he wanted something that would preserve the sled dog culture. And so you can see him here with his dog Feets. It was one of his favorite dogs. He used to do search and rescue with his dog team. He had these big, heavy freight dogs. So Malamutes and just bigger dogs. And so this is him hauling out an airplane wing out of a crash site. So this is actually how the race got started. He wanted to build something for people who loved sled dogs to be able to have this great sort of epic event. And that's how the Iditarod got started. So I want to talk about the dogs for a minute. This is a dog that I met. It belongs to one of the mushers from the junior Iditarod, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So I wanted you to notice some things about the dogs. They are slim, petite, kind of like marathon runners. If you picture a marathon runner, these are not Siberian Huskies, but they are blended with many other dog breeds, like little bits of German short-haired pointer and a tiny bit of greyhound and a little bit of German shepherd and a little bit of whatever they can get to improve the breed for long distance racing. So it's called an Alaskan Husky, and it's not an AKC recognized breed, but it is a very, very special breed for Alaskans. And so when you see these dogs, you might think, wow, how can they pull a sled for 1,000 miles? Well, when you have 15 friends, it's not that hard. So notice a few things. This was about the dogs was kind of my passion. And so when I went to present to Alaska school kids, that was the focus of my presentation. So the dogs have a double layer fur coat, and we're talking the thickest fur of any dog you've ever touched. It's really thick fur. It has all those insulating properties. Each harness for each dog is perfectly fitted for that dog. Each dog is kept on a lead or a rope or a chain to keep it safe. We're not, you might think of like chaining up a dog is kind of cruel, but in this situation, we want to keep the dogs separate. We want to keep them safe, and we want to keep them from making more dogs when you don't want to. Each dog during the race, most of the race, they will wear those booties that are getting passed around on their feet. And that is not to protect their feet from the cold. It's to protect their feet from snow and ice crystals that might get inside their pads of their feet and cause them to have to leave the race. And so they do everything they can in terms of canine nutrition. Everything about these dogs has been studied. These dogs have been studied scientifically more than racehorses have. So there's so much scientific literature about these dogs, and they're really, really incredible dogs. The next slide I want to show you is a musher named Josie Tier. She ended up being the Rookie of the Year, and she was the musher that I did a ride with, and I'll explain more about that in a second. And I show this picture to you because any musher worth anything loves their dogs and puts their dogs first. Every musher everywhere who competes in the Iditarod or is at that level, their dogs come first. In fact, if you ask them, how are you? They'll say, oh, my dogs are doing great. They only want to talk about their dogs. So I share this picture of Josie with one of her dogs because, and this is not the only picture I have of mushers loving on their dogs and that relationship. I mean, when you're in the wilderness and it's just you and your dogs, your life depends on them and their life depends on you. So this is why I wanted to share this picture and kind of set that as kind of the foundation. This is not an elite race for humans. It's an elite race for elite dogs. So you got to start somewhere. So you start with puppies. Most mushers try to have their litters born in the early spring, like so nowish. A lot of litters are being born. This is Erin Montgomery. She was teacher on the trail in 2015 with a sled dog puppy. And when the puppies get older, they start free running. So on the left, you see the mama dog with puppies, kind of older, and they just free run. And so you take the dogs places, you socialize them, you get them out and about, you transition them into their life where they're understanding that my life is about running, my life is about having fun, my life is about enjoying all these humans that I get to be around. And then they start doing motorized training. So this is like a summer tour in Michigan. These are both sent to me by a friend. But the truck there is motorized, so they're not pulling the truck. They're actually like just pulling like a tiny little bit. But what's neat is if you really think about how do you train a sled dog? Well, you don't really train a sled dog You put a young sled dog with a more experienced sled dog, and the older dog will teach the younger dogs. So if the musher yells haw, the older dog is going to push the younger dog to the left. If they yell whoa and they stop, then they know, oh, that means stop. And they pick it up like within 30 minutes. Like, this is not rocket science, because it draws on their innate desire to run and pull. So I wanted you to also see how athletic these dogs are. These are muscular, they're highly trained. They start training like maybe a mile at a time. And then as the winter goes, they build up miles. Mushers go on camping trips out in the wilderness with their dog, with 16 of their best, or 20 even of their best friends. And they do meetups, and they do everything they can to condition these dogs. This dog is named Blue, and it is a 4-time Iditarod finisher. So very, very experienced dogs.
Kate, is this like running a real marathon? If you finish, you've won?
Pretty much.
Okay.
I would say if you get to the point where you can feel like you've entered the race, you've won. You know, like how, if you like, because that's how I would feel if I entered a marathon. I'd be like, I won. Even if it was a 5K, I'd be like, wow, I did something. So I wanted to share this video with you. Hopefully the video, yeah. Oh, it's upside down. That's fun. Oh, that'll be awesome. Well then, but you can see they're excited, they're eager. I have no idea why it's doing that. All right. Okay.
We got it.
We can just tilt your head. But you can see they're all attached. They're all on the line. When they go, they quiet down and they go. That's what their focus is. So that was at the start of this year's race, and you can see how serious everybody was. You can see them untangling the lines and just really making sure that the dogs are safe to go down the trail. So just a quick note about how a sled dog team works. The sled is over there. The dogs that are closest to the sled are called wheel dogs. They kind of have to be kind of like the guys that just run and pull, and they're okay with the sled kind of twisting and slamming and squeaking and stuff. And then you might have 2 or 10 team dogs whose job is just to run. Then you have the swing dogs, and I'll explain that in a second. And then the lead dogs have to be a very special kind of dog, because they have to know the trail. They have to be constantly looking back to the musher, listening for commands, and kind of being aware of the situation and being willing to take risks and follow the lead. The swing dogs, and I changed it, sometimes they call them point dogs, but the swing dogs, their job, if the musher yells, for example, G, and the dogs want to go to the right, the lead dogs are going to jump to the right. Well, the swing dogs have to keep going enough so that they're not leading the entire team off the trail into the snowbank. So the swing dogs are going to keep going and kind of follow those lead dogs. So they're kind of like the second in command, which is really cool, because the mushers will notice which dogs are good at which thing. And they'll say, oh, I think you're ready to be a lead. And they'll put it with an experienced leader. Or, I think I'm going to keep you in team. And so they kind of rotate the dogs out, just so that, because being leader is stressful, right? If you've ever led anything, it's stressful. I also want to emphasize that this is Ryan Reddington, who is Joe Reddington Sr.'s grandson. He was the 2023 winner. To me, he's an exemplar of someone in the sport, because he comes from a mushing family. He is humble. He's very kind. He gives back. He sponsors junior mushers. He gives information and mentoring. And he's just really someone who, if anyone deserved after 16 tries to win, he did. So we were all just super thrilled with him winning. So that's a little bit about the race. And now I'm going to tell you about my journey.
Can I ask you what Iditarod stands for?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Iditarod is the name of a Native American town on the southern route, and it kind of just means faraway place. So and it became a mining town. A lot of these little interior villages were mining towns. So that's what it means. Okay.
Communications.
Yes.
Have they upgraded the satellite phones or GPS?
So this was the first year that they had Starlink on the routes. Not every checkpoint had it. Previous teachers on the trail carried around this giant package of like cables and I don't even know what all stuff it was, but that I carried, and I did not need a single bit of it because most of the places had Starlink. So, which is like the satellite internet, I guess you just set up a little station. Anyway, I don't know. Okay, so here's how I got started. I had heard of the Iditarod when I was a kid and maybe read some books or heard of Togo and Balto. But I was just listening to NPR one day and Blair Braverman came on and did an interview, and she was talking about her Iditarod run. I think this was going to be her second attempt, and how she talked about how her dogs, she has a Twitter thread. It's hysterical. I'm going to try to pass that to Father Mike. He can send it out, but it's hysterically funny and sweet about her dogs, and her dogs are all kind of different and weird looking. And so her critics were calling them ugly dogs. Anyway, this was a whole nother thing. So she said, oh, I'm going to take that as we do and turn it into my brand name. So now her fans are called ugly dogs. But anyway, I heard the interview and my hair just kind of went like this. And I was like, I have to do something. This is so cool. I have to do something. So I found the I Did a Read, which is basically a reading challenge because I teach 5th grade reading. I thought, that's something I could do. So I printed these checklist bookmark things, and the students would read the pages along with the musher that they chose to follow. I also had a student gave me the Dogs on the Trail book that Blair Braverman wrote, and when I sent a copy to my parents, my dad, who is a dog lover, stole it and wouldn't give it to my mom to look at. So it's a really sweet, cute, short little book, but it has wonderful pictures of her dogs, and it kind of explains like how the year of a musher life works. So then I thought, okay, what is this Teacher on the Trail thing? And I think I'd like to apply for it. So right there is my stack of 5 portfolio, 8 pages of questions, 2 lesson plans. How would I respond to controversy? The whole package, like literally the whole package, and a video. So I had to submit all that. And by that time, I was collecting books and doing a bunch of things in my classroom, mainly just sharing stories and books with my kiddos. And then things kind of escalated when I was chosen as a finalist. So the finalist for the 2024 Iditarod goes to the previous one. So I went to the 23 Iditarod, and I was there for 10 days. And basically the whole time I was there, I was being evaluated. Am I helpful? Am I someone that they want to hang around with? Am I too loud? Am I too soft? Do I know enough about the Iditarod? Do I not know enough? And I ask questions. I mean, it was just like that. And so this is me with ukulele that I really wanted to adopt and bring home. She was actually up for adoption, but I thought maybe not now. And so I really miss ukulele, but there's this iconic sleeping bag. So when I was chosen as the finalist, Julie was the Teacher on the Trail. And so after I became Teacher on the Trail for 24, the sleeping bag passed to me. And so you notice at the bottom, there's no Kate patch. That's Julie's patch. And so we met up in Rochester, New York, where Julie lives, and she passed the sleeping bag to me. So that's kind of an iconic thing that now I have to get the sleeping bag dry cleaned and send it to the next teacher. So another thing that I got to do, which was really fun, was I got to design my patch. Well, I thought, I work with 10-year-olds, right? You can outsource a lot of labor to 10-year-olds. And so I had my students, and the art teacher helped me create a contest for the patch. And so my student Katie, which I thought was great because same name, right? This was her drawing that she drew, and then in front of you or in your pocket, you can see the final product. My friend Melissa helped me with the words around the outside. But anyway, that was another great thing I had to do, along with, once I got selected, I had to get all my gear. So the mucklucks and socks and they were like head to toe, even the undies. I was like, okay. So just everything had to be the right kind of gear. And then on the left, you see my lesson plan calendar. And so The tenure of Teacher on the Trail is from July 1st to June 30th of the next year. And so in July, I had to be ready with lesson plans and posts about the Iditarod to share with the world. So I made a calendar, and this is like page 1 of like a 15-page document of all of my lesson plans or my projected ideas for the year. And it's all based on that Dogs on the Trail book, where I took a year in the life of a mushing person and the dogs and created lesson plans that would tie into some of those themes. So the lesson plan that just came out has to do with, I forgot because I'm already thinking about the next one. But anyway, they're all connected to the themes of the life. So the next one that's coming out is about traveling with your dog. As you saw with the puppy training, they take them places and go all over the place. And so the lesson plan will be about traveling with your dog. So if anyone has a dog and has any recommendations, shoot them my way. So that was kind of the thing. And I developed a lesson plan that would come out on the 10th of every month, a classroom culture post that would come out on the 20th of every month, that was about how I use the Iditarod to kind of help bring life and engagement and excitement into my classroom. So all of our class jobs are based on Iditarod volunteer positions, and I'll talk about the volunteers in a minute. Just things like that that would kind of help make your class more fun. And then the last post kind of came out about as kind of a happy accident, because I was talking to my mentor, Terry Hankey, who is, she was 2006 Teacher on the Trail, and she's been on the trail, I don't know, 15 times. And she's the mentor for all the new teachers on the trail. And we were just talking about how, oh, Kate, you know, when you get on the trail, the only thing you're going to have to drink is lots of Tang. And I blurted out, oh, they drank Tang in space. And she just kind of stopped and said, well, that would make a really cool connection. And so the Houston We Have a Connection series was born. And so every 30th of every month, I posted something to do with space and the Iditarod connection. A link in the document is everything I've written. So have fun. So I get to Alaska, and the very first thing I'm asked to do is drive on the ice road. Jane Holmes is the director of Iditarod Education, and she met me at the hotel, and we kind of walked around the first day and just kind of got my bearings and everything, and picked up any supplies that I might have still needed. And then she invited me over to her house for moose stew, which was a first. So I rented this wonderful car that broke down later, but so she invited me to come out to her house. So she was driving and I was driving behind her, and she's like, oh, we'll go on the ice road. Are you okay with that? And I was like, sure, I'm in Alaska. Let's drive on an ice road. So the ice there is about 3 to 4 feet thick, and it stays frozen all winter. And so they drive on the ice road in the summer, and they boat across the lake to get to her house in the winter. And so that was a lovely picture that was taken right after I spun out a little bit. And Jane said, oh, no, that's such a great picture. We're gonna take that picture. So the next week or so, I spent doing school presentations to local schools in Wasilla and Anchorage and kind of in around in that area. And it was just whichever teachers wanted to sign up and hear the Teacher on the Trail talk. So this over here is inside the gym portable of a Native American charter school that had like a community center and a bunch of portables for all grade levels. And so I think I was speaking in this picture to about 10 or so 4th and 5th graders. So these schools are tiny. And so that was most of what I did the first week I was there. I did do some Zoom presentations to teachers around the US. This is the German school in Anchorage. So you can see the German flag. And it's a K-8 school where they are bilingual in English and German. So that was kind of cool. I became Frau Newmeyer. So the really kind of interesting and sad and poignant part of my trip was I was at Larson Elementary, the home of the Eagles, which is the same mascot that I have. It's on my patch. My husband texted me and said, I'm having to take Gus to the vet for the last time. Oh. And so this is the last picture I have of him. And I wanted to just share that because it kind of gave like a more of a poignancy to my trip than it would have otherwise in terms of how I related to the dogs. My opportunities to visit and interact with dogs just became that much more important. And so I wanted to just to just share, because that was a big part of the trip too, kind of that, having that grief kind of carried like as an undercurrent through it. So the very next weekend after my first week was the Junior Iditarod, and the Junior Iditarod is a race for 14 through 17-year-olds. Raise your hand if you're 14 through 17. My kid. And so these kids are incredible. They are like mini mushers on the rise, that they just love their dogs. It was kind of a snowy day. I was supposed to fly from the start of the race to the checkpoint, and I couldn't do that, and so more about that. But these mushers, these are teens, and they are so dedicated. If you've ever seen a teenager just so into what they're doing and so focused, I have, that's what these teenagers are like. And they were so impressive to me. I got to meet with them. I got to talk with them and their parents, which because I'm a parent of teenagers, and it just meant so much to me to share and hear the stories of the parents about these kids. So the Junior Iditarod goes from Kinnick Lake, where there's a bar, you should go there, and it's got really good food, but they go from Kinnick Lake to Eagle Quest, which is their checkpoint. They go to Yentna Station, which is a roadhouse, and then that's 75 miles, and then they mush back. So they spend the night at Yentna Station, staying up all night, having a bonfire, just being teenagers, and then they mush back. Well, this is what it looks like on the trail. And when you can't fly, you're on a snow machine and you're a popsicle, but there's dogs. So this was a photo that Whitney McLaren, the photographer of the Junior Iditarod, she's an incredible photographer. I encourage you to check out her photos. She's just such a wonderful person too. I got to spend a lot of time with her on the trail and in Nome when I finally got there, and just meet her friends and everything. So she's just a wonderful person, and she took this really cool photo of me on a snow machine. But I did an interview, again, another upside down video, so that's fun. That's when the mushers were going through Eagle Quest and having to navigate those turns and everything. And it's really real when you see it. It's really like you're right in the middle of them, you know, trying to get the dogs to do what you want them to do, and go around these corners, and the sled is creaking and there's people there. I'll spare you the upside downness. But this is Emily Robinson, and she was the winner of this year's Junior Iditarod. She's 17, and this was her third time winning. So the first time for someone to win the Junior Iditarod 3 times. Oh no, she's 16. She'll be able to do it next year. And she'll also turn 18 in the week between the Junior Iditarod and the Iditarod. And so after she wins the Junior Iditarod, I'm assuming she'll win it for the 4th time. She'll turn 18 and then be eligible to run in the Iditarod.
Oh, wow.
So that's pretty, she was just an incredible person, very, very willing to share and focused, and just an incredible person. So then we go to the end of the Junior Iditarod, and the prizes that they had for these kids were out of this world. This is Addie Ann Randall. You saw her going through the Eagle Quest checkpoint. The sweetest, cutest kiddo. Her mom and I talked a lot. We kind of became Facebook friends, and just a wonderful, wonderful family. She became Rookie of the Year for the Junior Iditarod. So that's the person who is brand new to the race, who has the fastest time. And then that's Arian Sanderson and her mom and her little niece, I think. And Arian Sanderson is an interesting person because she's only 14 and she did not grow up in a mushing family. I learned all this from talking to her mom, but she learned how to mush from her neighbor, and it was like her obsession. And so her family's like, we don't know what happened. She just likes this, so we're supporting her. And I'm like, yeah, that's what good families do. So that was just a really, really nice component of the trip, to be able to meet and talk with these teenagers and their families. I won't bore you with the boring parts of the conference. There's a teacher conference. The candidates for next year presented. But I do want to highlight 2 things about the teacher conference. On the left is Liz Millman. She's a vet. She's Dr. Liz Millman. And so she's been running the return dog program for many years, and she's very, very good at it. The return dog program is when a dog maybe has an injury to its paw or is suspected of having maybe aspiration pneumonia or something that's going to really cause that dog to be impacted, to not be able to do the race. They take the dog and send it home. And so Liz runs this program, and she is really, really wonderful at it. It's all about the dogs and 100% dog care. And I'm going to show you some pictures of the return dog lot in a minute. And then this is Ellen Reddington, Ryan's niece, who was a junior Iditarod contestant and also a published author. So I forgot to grab those books out of my classroom, but she was just a wonderful person to talk to. And she writes kind of these inspiring books for kids about her dogs. Okay, these knuckleheads, that's Andrew right there. We're testing my presentation about dog DNA. And so, as I said, the sled dogs have been so well studied that I wanted to share kind of some of the science behind sled dog DNA. And so these guys helped me test out my activity, which was putting together a strand of DNA kind of according to the proteins and creating this sled dog with different characteristics. And so we were kind of determining which dogs, which dogs they had created by randomly pulling their DNA out of envelopes, what kind of dogs they created. And what was really, really weird about them testing this activity is all of these guys accidentally created a sled dog that was most like them in their athletic abilities, which I thought was really, really weird. So vet checks are an important part of the pre-race activities. These are the vet checks for the Iditarod, and that takes place during the time of the teacher conference because it's a great time for members of the public to go and interact with sled dogs. The mushers have already taken their dogs to extensive pre-race vet checks, EKGs, all the pills, all the microchips, everything that you could possibly imagine. This is just the final check. They call it HAWL, HAWL, and it's an acronym that's kind of like a nose to tail final exam that they sign off on. And so these dogs are so well socialized that they're like, whatever, do what you got to do, Oh, by the way, do you have treats? They're just so, it's just a great opportunity for them to come and get some love and attention and, have that final vet check. And also an opportunity for people like me to go interact with dogs if that's what, we need to do. So these dogs, as I said, so the vets are volunteers. They're not hired by Iditarod. In fact, Iditarod doesn't happen without about 2,000 volunteers, including pilots, including vets, including trail crew, including comms and logs people, logistics and communications people. So you too could go, and you don't have to go the whole time. You could go for 3 or 4 days and just be like a trail crew and like just be out in the wilderness and fly on the airplane and just go help for as long as you feel like you were able to do that. So that's pretty amazing about the volunteers. This is what a typical dog lot looks like. We visited Travis Beal's kennel. Most of the dog lots look like this. Each dog has its own snug little box with straw inside. The dogs are kept separate for reasons I mentioned before. And they have like a little chain where they can run around and they get their food, and they always have clean water. And every kennel has maybe 4, 5, or 6 handlers that are young people just wanting to go out into Alaska to work and use their muscles. And those people work with the dogs and they keep everything clean and tidy. So there is not a single ounce of mess anywhere. These dogs are really, really well taken care of. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but all the dogs have personalities, just like we all do. That some are shy, some are really excitable. They all have different personalities. This dog is named Georgia. And while I was at the kennel, Andrew texted me with a picture of Gus's collar and all the things. And I lost it. I was just crying and grieving. And so when I got myself together, I went out into the dog lot to go interact with some dogs, and I wanted to find one that I could really interact with. And I was just having a grand old time taking selfies with Georgia and, looking at how cute she was. And I must have spent like 20 minutes with Georgia. When I got back and talked to the musher's wife, she said to me, Georgia's not normally like that. She normally avoids people. And I told her the news I had just gotten, and she said, I think Georgia knew. So, I mean, these dogs are so intelligent and so intuitive that, you know, just telling that story kind of gets me choked up. So the next thing I got to go to was the musher meeting, which is where the race marshal, in fact, that's Mark Nordman, and he was the former race marshal, but everybody knows him and loves him because he did it for so long. These are all the mushers in one room getting the lowdown on all the race details. Part of my job while I was there was to get trail mail signed. Each musher got a packet of stuff. And one of the most important things that they get, that they have to have at all times, is their vet books. And each page in the vet book lists their dogs, and they have to record all of the exams and everything and get their vet books signed by the veterinarians at every place on the trail that has those, where the veterinarians are. They have ointment for the paws. The envelope over there is trail mail, and a student makes the art every year. And so it's kind of Iditarod promotional material, but each musher carries a packet of trail mail that they sign, and then those envelopes go back to classrooms like mine. And you know, you can, for $10, you too could have a trail mail envelope for your classroom. This guy went to Clear Lake High School. This is a musher. We were just talking. He's like, where are you from? I'm from Houston. I'm from Houston. Like, well, okay. And then we kind of narrowed it down. I'm like, what? So we had to get a picture. That was fun. Then comes the musher banquet, the pre-race banquet, where they do all the speeches and yada yada. But the most important ritual in this banquet is pulling the bib numbers out of a muckluck. So I couldn't get a picture of it because I was so far away, but that's Mark with Bryce Mumford, one of the mushers, and he's pulling his bib number out of a muckluck. Now, why that's important is because it determines the starting order. Mushers usually want to go somewhere in the middle. They don't want to draw bib number 2. There is no bib number, well, there is a bib number 1, but it always goes to an honorary person. So a person that they want to honor that's associated with the race, someone who is either alive or has passed on that they want to honor. So bib number 1 always goes to an honorary person. And so they pull their bib numbers out of a muckluck. That'll determine their starting order. And in the race guide, there's a place, if you're a spectator at the banquet, you can write down those bib numbers and just have that inside information before anybody else. And so you also, once you pull your bib number, you go to a table and you pick up 16 tags that have that bib number on it for your dogs, so that the dogs are then associated with you and your bib number, if you're a musher. Another cool thing that they do is in downtown Anchorage, of course, because they want a functioning city, they clear the snow, but because the race starts in downtown Anchorage, they bring in dump trucks and they put the snow back. And they call it the snow dump, and there's usually some festivities and ice sculptures and stuff I won't bore you with, but they create this pathway through the city, you know, for the dogs to, because you kind of need snow, like that's kind of how it works. So they put the snow back in downtown Anchorage to allow the ceremonial start of the race. So Saturday is the ceremonial start, and it really is like a party. The upside down video I'm going to show you will kind of hopefully capture that party feel. But it's like there's food and vendors and dogs and spectators and VIPs and people. I mean, it's crazy. This picture, there's me, Linda, who was a former teacher on the trail, Erin, and then Angie Taggart is a teacher. She wasn't a teacher on the trail, but she was also an Iditarod finisher, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so here's the upside down video showing the party atmosphere. You can't really hear the sound either, so that's fun. But there's so much going on, and all the teams are like on the street and stacked up, and dogs are barking and pushing and lunging, and there's handlers everywhere. Every dog has a leash in addition to the neckline and the tug line that's attaching it to the central rope. And so the handlers bring the dog to the starting position, and then they unclip the leash. And there's a group of military guys, like big burly guys, that hold the sled. And so I was sitting in the sled as an Iditarider. So the teacher on the trail gets to ride in one of the sleds. I got to ride with Josie. And so I got to see, from the dogs, well, from the mushers, not even from the mushers' perspective, because I was right behind 12 dog butts, kind of trotting up and down. And yes, they do poop on the trail, so that was a thing. But the guys were like right in front of me holding the sled back, and they were all kind of chattering and stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening. So the next upside down video will show you kind of a little bit of my ride through the woods, and I am so sorry that the videos did that. But it kind of gives you, like, the trail goes through Anchorage on these bike trails. It's about 11 miles. And then the dogs are like, oh, we've had a nice little mini training run. And then, you know, they, at some point during this part of the ride, someone dropped a box of Girl Scout cookies into Josie's hand, and she threw it at me and said, could you keep this? Now we have Girl Scout cookies. And by the end of the ride, I had, like, under my blanket, I had, like, all these treats and snacks that people had given her.
Do all the sleds have a weight limit? I mean, or do you carry food? Do you, I mean?
Yes, that's such a great question. And this is a great time to talk about that too. There's mandatory gear that every musher has to carry. They have to carry some kind of cooker for heating up hot water to provide water for their dogs and heat the dog food, which is frozen. And they use HEET, which is like a
Liquid.
accelerant. Yeah, so they use that to light their fires. They have to have that. They have to have a sleeping bag. They have to have enough dog booties for 2 booties for each dog, either on the dog or in their sled. They have to have a certain amount of dog food with them. They have to have their vet books. They have to have, there's a bunch of other stuff that they have to have. So no, there's no weight limit, but you're not going to want to add a bunch of weight to your sled. Some of the mushers start off with a bunch of things and then they just drop things, you know, throughout the race. Ryan Reddington showed up at one of the checkpoints with Christmas lights on his sled, but I didn't see those Christmas lights later in the race. Did not. So this is what the dogs kind of do after their runs. They kind of like put their noses in the snow and cool off, and they're panting and they're so happy. And the thing that makes them happy is because the very first thing the mushers do is give them water and a snack.
Are the dogs male and?
Yes, male and female. Yep.
Are they fixed?
No,
No.
no.
Hmm.
They do everything they can to keep the dogs apart, and that's why the dogs are kept tethered at all times, because you really, I mean, female dogs do go into heat, and that's one of the reasons why you would take the dog off of the trail. But if the female dog's not in heat and she's a good team dog or leader, you're going to keep that dog on your team. So as we were leaving the starting chute by air, this is what it looks like. So this is the start, and the upside down video you saw earlier at the start was kind of the official going down the, you know, leaving the starting point and off you go into the woods, and God bless you. And so this is kind of what it looked like from the air. It's like a community center, and all of this is a frozen lake. And so they just put the trail out on the lake and they go across and disappear up into the woods. So this was
How time apart between each
2 minutes.
2 minutes?
2 minutes, so just enough time. And so that's why they get everybody ready, and that countdown, making sure everybody's untangled, holding the sled back, and then by the time they get 3, 2, 1, go, they can just let go, because the musher will say ready, and whatever they say, sometimes they'll say hike or let's go, and the dogs just go. They stop barking and they just lunge forward and they just want to go, and they'll settle into a trot after a while. The other really interesting thing that happens to the dogs is after 2 or 3 days, they have a metabolism shift where they are metabolizing so well that they can run on pure fat and pure protein. So that's most of what the food is it's fat and protein, like good, organic, raw everything. They do make a special kibble, and it's basically that and water. And so their metabolism just flips, and then they can go for these long distances. It's pretty amazing. So the start of my trail adventure. So part of the checkpoint, one of the checkpoints that the Iditarod mushers kind of blow through is the end checkpoint for the junior Iditarod, but the next major checkpoint is Squentna, and most of the mushers either they usually stop there for quite a while, because it's maybe 85 miles down the road. So I got here by air. This is the checkpoint sign. This is a really cool place because it's a roadhouse There's a group of women called the Squintin' Sweeties that come and cook every year. And then there's a group of guys and gals from Seattle that are just regular old, Seattle working people throughout the year. But they come to Squintin' every year to help set up the checkpoint. It's a huge place because it's at the start of the race and everybody goes through and everybody stays. And so they have it organized, they have hot water station, they have food, they have everything. And so what's neat is that the volunteers and the mushers are really mingling together. All of the vets, everybody's just kind of now starting to kind of interact. And so when I took my my sleeping overnight on the trail, I was right next to mushers and right with them and hearing them and kind of interacting with them, which was really cool. So this is what the checkpoint looks like at 6 a.m. or no, in the evening. The blue is straw bales for the dogs to sleep on. Any rejected dog food that they don't eat, they place here, and then they send it home. They also have a trash bin, but they also have like a return pile that the mushers can say, well, I didn't really need this after all. If it's edible food that they would have, it goes to the community. And so then that kind of is another way that the race kind of gives back to the community. And then when I got to Squintin', I was first. I was winning. So every musher has a GPS tracker. I have a GPS tracker on my backpack that stopped working about halfway through the race, but that's okay. Because when I got to Squintin', I was in first place. So you can see that my speed was 85.5 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I was pretty fast and my status was teaching, but no, seriously, they all have a GPS tracker. So you can kind of see on this. And this is like it's like $40 a year, but you can pay for the service to have like the GPS tracker and be able to see exactly where each musher is. And if it's green, they're racing. Average speed is probably 8 miles an hour throughout the whole race. And if it's red, they're resting. So you can kind of tell who's doing what. Things got interesting a little bit at the end of this race because we weren't quite sure what people were doing. And like I said, my tracker shut off, but I was really excited to be in first place at that moment. And then I show you this picture because the race does not go according to day and night. Each musher creates a run rest schedule that works for their dogs. It's usually about 3 or 4 hours running, 3 or 4 hours rest, depending on how their team is doing. And so mushers are up and volunteers are up at all times of day or night, taking care of the dogs. The volunteers usually worked in shifts so that you would have a shift of people that would do the night shift and some in the morning, and you would kind of rotate through. But the mushers are constantly resting and snatching those few hours of sleep where they can. Most of the time that they're in a checkpoint is dog care. It takes about maybe 60% of their time in the checkpoint to do the dog care that they need to do, and then they'll go rest and get food.
What time of year, how much daylight, how much?
So early March, it's a great question. Early March, sunrise was usually about 8 in the morning or so. I mean, they're slow sunrises and sunsets. So the other picture I showed you was probably 6:30, maybe 7 at night, but it's a very long sunset. So final sunset would be like maybe 9:30. And then sunrise, probably 8 in the morning.
So you got roughly 12 hours.
Yeah, it's roughly about 12 hours. Yeah. So this is a pretty typical plane that I flew in, pretty typical pilot. There's my trail bag. And so it was just me and the pilot. Usually there was, and a lot of these planes have like a third seat, and sometimes I would get shoved back in there. But that's the transportation. It's either dog sled or airplane. There's really not much else in these interior places. So this is Galena, one of the checkpoints that I spent some time in. And what's nice about all of these checkpoints is that it becomes a community like event when the dog teams start to come through. People gather, there was a little fire going. People were kind of just hanging out and enjoying time together. Galena is an airstrip, a roadhouse, and about 400 people. And so this garage place was kind of where they had food, sleeping mats, and places for the mushers to hang out and dry their things. I chose to sleep in here instead of in the roadhouse because I wanted to just be around the mushers. This is where the communications setup was, and so I could see easily if a dog team was coming through, and I could get up and go greet them. But you can see way back here, that's my sleeping bag way in the back. And I just chose to sleep there because it would have given me it just gave me a richer experience of being around the mushers and the volunteers and kind of seeing everything come and go. And then people in the community brought food. This was true everywhere we went. Most of the time they would just bring whatever they had and just share it. So every checkpoint I went, they would bring food to share. This is another checkpoint I got to visit briefly, Takatna, and it's known for its pies. And I only saw actually 3/4 of a pie while I was there because I was there for such a short time. But you can kind of see typical checkpoint has a place for the dogs to park, the dog teams to park and sleep, and they do keep them tethered while the dogs are sleeping. Some of the dogs wear jackets just to kind of help keep them warm. There's usually a community center where the communications is and where people can kind of come in and out. And then there's a place for the mushers to rest and get food and get, and people from the community bring them food. So the interesting thing about my trip to this checkpoint is that nobody knew where I was because I was given the opportunity. I was sitting at breakfast one day. I was done with my coffee, and they said, "Oh, you want to take a scenic flight?" And I was like, "Sure." So we took a scenic flight to one of the checkpoints, and then I happened to tell the pilot, "Well, I'm going to this checkpoint later today." And he's like, "Oh, no, let's just go now." And so on the way back, he dropped me off, but nobody knew where I was, and I didn't have my backpack with my tracker. So they phoned Takatna and said, "Oh, teacher on the trail is coming." But the pilot dropped me at the airport and he said, "Oh, it's just half a mile down the road. You can walk." And I thought, okay, that's fine. It was more like a mile, which was fine. And it took me a long time because I was taking my time and enjoying my walk, darn it. And they didn't know where I was. And so where were you? I was fine. I'm right here. So that's kind of a big deal, kind of knowing where everybody is. And they have these popsicle sticks with, like where everybody is. So in Anchorage, in McGrath, in Unalakleet, and in Nome are the 4 logistics centers where they plan all the flights of who's going where and what pilot is needed where. And if they're bringing dogs off the trail, are you going to put dogs in, it's just it's a huge logistics operation. And this is how they keep track of everybody. So everybody gets a popsicle stick. It's color coded. Mine said taught for teacher on the trail. In McGrath is one of the main dog lots for return dogs. And so they had a boys side and a girls side for obvious reasons. And so they really took such good care of these sweetie pies. A lot of times it was just, I don't want to race anymore. I want to go home. And then they would pull the dog off the team and send it home. And so they take them back to Anchorage, and the handlers from each kennel are responsible for picking up the dog. But while the dogs are waiting, they're kind of just hanging out. And so we're encouraged to go spend time with them. So this was another opportunity that I had to go hang out with sled dogs. And so you can see a lot of they put a GPS tracker on the return dog. Each dog has its little paper collar. It's color coded with how important the medical condition is. And so, these dogs they're just so well taken care of. The fact that dog is laying sideways, legs spread out, means it's happy, contented, warm, not worried about anything. And so I just sat in the straw and hung out with dogs. Another really amazing part of my trip was getting to see the dog teams from the air. And so you can see the dog team right there. I got to fly with one of the official photographers. And so the pilot was just going around the trail and going up and kind of around just so she could get really good shots, which meant I could get really good shots with my little phone camera. But I loved being in the air, and I loved seeing the landscape and talking to the pilots who are either former military or they are commercial pilots, and they just love flying. And so they come up and volunteer, or they live in Alaska and they volunteer their time on the trail to do this because they love talking to people and meeting people. And so I just had the best time in the air. This is Galena, one of the other checkpoints in the interior. It's the first checkpoint I went to on the Yukon River. This is Dr. Tamara Huntington. Her family goes way, way back in this community. And she took a whole morning with me to show me the town, to show me the boarding school, to show me the technology school, to show me the health clinic, to talk to me about the community. We went to the hardware store, we went to her home. She was such a generous person. And so I just wanted to share about her because she was kind of one of the iconic figures in this town. She knew every person in the town, every issue, every problem, all the students. I mean, it was just amazing. And so then this is on the left, just a dog team kind of coming into the checkpoint. Okay, I love this picture and I wanted to share it with you because sled dogs are really smart. They know as soon as they get to a checkpoint, they can kind of sense, like if the musher says, I'm going to declare like a rest period here, the dogs are like, all right, I'm done. Let's take the booties off. So this dog has decided not to wait for its musher to come along the line and take the booties off. It's already starting to remove booties. And I watched this dog take each booty off one at a time and just be like, okay, done. Where's my food? Where's my snack? So some kind of other interesting stories about the trail is I was heading out of Galena to the next checkpoint, but it was a long flight because I was in one of the small planes with the photographer. And so the first stop we made was to drop off a box of coffee at the next checkpoint. And it just kind of blew my mind that we were going to get in an airplane, fly to the next town and drop off a box of coffee because that's what they needed. So that was fun. That's another kind of quirky story that, you know, from the trail. This is Caltag from the air. It's a pretty typical town along the Yukon River where they have just the settlement. Most of the towns along the Yukon River get supplies and cars and everything by barge in the summertime, but of course in the wintertime they're pretty much snowed in. So they have to be very self-sufficient, but I love that picture because it shows the town and the river and the landscape and everything. And another picture of the landscape this was going down from Caltag to Unalakleet, which is right here. This right here is a ridge, and at the base of that ridge is Old Woman Cabin, which is sort of an unofficial checkpoint for the mushers. And then we reach Unalakleet, which is along the Bering Sea coast. It's the first town checkpoint along the sea coast, which is completely frozen. There is a bunch of jumbo ice underneath the snow and everything, but they put the checkpoint kind of out in this field kind of away because where the checkpoint was, the sea ice was like way down the street this way. But they build up these snow barriers so that the dogs can rest out of the wind. The mushers send up their drop bags down the trail so that they can have their supplies. They don't have to carry everything the whole time. And they send things out ahead of time. And then some of them even bring a sled that they can change into like more of a different sled, a faster sled, maybe for the end of the race, or a different sled, because from here on out, most of the trail is on the sea ice. The town of Unalakleet is really interesting because it has one main street. And I love this steeple. It kind of has this old sort of New England maritime quality to it. And so one of the joys was going out through these towns and taking pictures of all the different like random things that I saw. And speaking of random, a guy in the community tried to woo all of the seemingly unattached women, whether they were attached or not, by bringing them books. And so this was one of the books that I don't even know his name. He was like, have you read this book? I was like, no, I haven't read this book. And so it just became a thing. And then this was where we ate bacon, eggs, and pancakes pretty much for like 3 days straight. And in my case, it was bacon and granola bars. And oh my gosh, I was so done with bacon and granola bars all that time. This was from Unalakleet to Nome. This was a commercial flight, and by commercial I mean 8 passengers on the plane going across the sea ice. That's kind of what it looked like of us just getting on board the plane. And then the finish line in Nome, and Nome was, I think, my favorite place on the race, partly because it was the finish line and partly because I just loved the town so much. Because it had this weird little national forest that they would put on the ice every year. And then they would just stick the trees, you know. And so Caroline, one of the vets, she was from New Zealand. She and I hung out quite a bit and just did silly stuff. And so then, of course, one of the things that they do is they offer all these workshops and activities for people, tourists who come to Nome. And so, of course, I was going to go take a Kiviat knitting workshop because why wouldn't you? Like, if you're a knitter and you're in Nome, you're going to go do that. So that was really fun. I forgot to bring the thing I made, but that stuff is really soft and it's really expensive. So this is trail mail. This is the packet that they carried on the sled. And this is, I just took this sort of little tableau of my job was to collect all the trail mail off the sleds, open the packet, sort the trail mail, and then make sure the mail got to the mailbox, to the post office and got sent back to the classrooms. And so that was kind of an ongoing job that I had to do. And then I was sitting in the office in Nome one day and a couple guys were talking about going to Safety, which is 20 miles before Nome on a snow machine and bringing back some return dogs. And I said, can I go with you? And they said, sure. So I went to Safety on a snow machine, and the Safety Roadhouse is the last checkpoint. It was really cold that day. And then the tradition is anyone that visits the Safety Roadhouse, you put your name on a dollar bill and you staple it to the wall. So I did that. The whole place, like from floor to ceiling, like imagine every single surface of this room covered in dollar bills. That's what it looked like. So here's the winner, Dallas Seavey. He is a through and through third generation powerhouse engineer, innovator, go-getter. So this was his 6th record-breaking win. Just everything about him is all about the dogs, all about shaving time off of his times, all about being the best racer he can be. So the winning money that he won from this year will cover 1 year of dog food. That's it.
Over $60,000.
Yeah.
But Kate, what was
Yeah.
it with his time be? How long?
He took 8 days and just a few hours.
Okay. thank
Yeah.
you.
And the total distance of
998 miles.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are they able to pass another sled?
Oh, yeah.
Is there, it didn't look like it's that wide that, you know, the cut.
Oh, they pass each other all the time. The GPS, so-and-so's in lead. They were leapfrogging all the way to about the middle of the race. So there he is with his lead dog Arrow at the end of the race. It was so mobbed that I could only get like these little tiny pictures, you know, kind of through the crowd. And then really amazing person. And then at night when the teams came in, so every team that came in, there was a big siren that went through the town, but they left their Christmas lights up. So it was just really picturesque. So this is the police escort coming up, and then they would kind of peel off and the dog team would come up the ramp and come in. And this is Josie coming in, my musher who carried me on the Iditarod. She was Rookie of the Year. This was a 20-year dream of hers. She's from Idaho. And she just was so sweet and so sweet to her dogs and just had this wonderful way of talking to them. And she was just, when she saw me up there, I was just kind of standing back, not really expecting anything. She gave me a big hug. And it was like, that's the kind of relationship that you build with people on the trail because it's so amazing. Yeah. And then I got to go mushing.
Wow.
So Whitney, the photographer, took me mushing. And so I got to actually mush a team of 8 dogs. And yeah, that was pretty amazing. It was I only went like 1.5 miles, but I'm sure I'm ready to go 1,000, right? And then another job that I got to do as teacher on the trail is to give the Red Lantern. So the last musher to finish gets the Red Lantern Award. And as Father Mike was saying before, you win when you enter the race. You win even if you come in last. And so the Red Lantern, I brought the 2 lanterns to kind of share the tradition. The silver one is the widow's lamp, and they have one on the finish line. And that lamp gets extinguished when the last person is safely in off the trail. And so that's kind of that tradition. But the Red Lantern kind of came about as a joke. And then they were like, no, this is serious. Like having the last person finish the race, that's huge. Okay. And so over the last couple of years, it's become the tradition for the teacher on the trail. When that last musher, this is a building, and then right beyond it is the sea ice. They come up this little ramp off the sea ice, and they know they've made it because they only have like 6 blocks to go. And I'm standing there going, here's your red lantern, you gotta carry this for the next 6 blocks. They're like, what, am I done? What happened? So Jeff Reed has a really interesting story because his dogs they got to know him and they wouldn't go any further. They didn't know it was only 20 miles further. So he said, I'm gonna give him rest, I'm gonna give him water, I'm gonna give him snacks, and they still wouldn't go. And so he's like, I'm not gonna be done with this race 22 miles from the finish line. So he got them all harnessed up and he talked to him and he walked and he walked and he walked. And finally the dogs were like, oh, you want us to go? Fine, we'll go. And because they didn't know it was only 20 miles and he knew, and he was like, I'm not stopping, but I can't push my dogs I have to convince them. I have to let them think it was their idea. So that's kind of how his Red Lantern race ended. And then at the very end, the very last day I was on the trail, there's this lavish banquet.
Oh, boy.
And so I share these photos because there were 3 of those actual sleds filled with chocolate covered strawberries that had to be flown in from Anchorage.
Wow.
These flowers, the whole thing, there were speeches and oh my gosh, and awards and prizes. I'm like, oh my goodness. And then everybody got on what they call the banquet flight, which was scheduled to leave at 11:30 p.m. It leaves when everybody's on the plane. So this little tiny airport in Nome was completely mobbed. Oh, I forgot to share the picture that I stole with Dallas and his dog Arrow, who the winner. He was taking pictures and I just got in the picture. And so then we all rush, we get our stuff, everything was packed, we all rush to the airport and we wait and we wait and we wait. And the airport has like, 4 times as many people as it's actually built for, because we're all waiting to get on that last flight back to Anchorage. And so I look over and here's Amanda Otto and Paige Drobny, who actually came in the top 10, just hanging out with their trophies in the airport, just shooting the breeze, waiting like everybody else, but they have their Iditarod trophy. And so I sat next to a boys basketball team who was going to Anchorage for the state finals. And so all these mushers are on the plane. And I'm like, man, if this plane is so full of stories and so full of amazing people. And I just was feeling so overwhelmed by the end of my trail. And then when I got home, it was like, what just happened? So I am honored and thrilled to be able to be here and share my stories with you. It is restorative and renewing to be able to share at least some of the things with you. And I'm so, so glad that you all came. I think that my last picture kind of sums up everything. It's all about the dogs. Whitney took this picture and it just kind of captures everything I love about the race, because it really, at the end, it really isn't about what we can do. It's about what we can do with our dogs and what the dogs help us become. So thank you. I think I went probably a little over, and I'm so sorry, Father Mark, couldn't hear the.
8 minutes.
Okay. Does anyone have any more questions or? Yes.
What happens when the dogs have race?
So the dogs get loaded into these big, like each one has a box. And so at the very end of the race, they go get the food dog lot and they get taken care of and checked out and everything. And then they get flown back to Anchorage and the dog handlers pick them up and they take them back wherever their kennel is located. Yes.